I love to see the towns passing by and to ride these rails neath God's blue sky. Let me travel this land from the mountains to the sea, 'cause that's the life I believe He meant for me. And when I'm gone and at my grave you stand, say God called home your rambling man.
Welcome to Ramblin' Man Podcast, episode number 184. This one is part 1 of 2 of my interview with Alan Sims of the Inside of Knoxville website / blog, whatever you'd like to call it. For the purposes of the podcast, I'm referring to Alan as Knoxville Citizen Reporter and Urban Observer. And I hope he doesn't want to punch me for calling him those things. But I feel like that's an apt description for him. Had a lot of fun talking to Alan. Known him for a bunch of years, so this was an easy conversation, which is why it is broken up into 2 episodes, because we talked for over 3 hours. If you don't know Alan and would like to learn more about him and his work, go to insideofknoxville.com and you can see all his content there. And from there, it has outbound links to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of those, to where you can give him a follow on the social media, making sure you tell him Ramblin' Man sent you. But yeah, it was a good chat with Alan. This is part 1 of 2. Part 2 will come out in 2 weeks. Yeah, really appreciate Alan making the time and coming on. Sponsor this week is Feral Giant. Feral Giant is a graphic design, illustration, and social media consultation company based here in Knoxville, Tennessee. So they do work for clients big and small all over the country, all over the globe, in fact. But they also do photography, videography, video editing, and audio editing, website design, SEO, writing, content development. Hell, they'll babysit your kids if it nets them money. So make sure you give them a follow on social media on either Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn at Feral Giant. And be sure to give them an email today and hire them for your next project. Without much further ado, here's the episode. The funny thing about doing this in these times we're living in is not talking about these times that we're living in.
What times would that be?
Just saying that dates it on when this is being recorded.
Right.
There is a chat thread with 2 of my friends. One of the other things is I'm not being rude. I'm checking the levels to make sure we're both not ready.
It's all good. Okay. I've done this. It's not my first rodeo. So.
There's a chat thread with 2 other guys that I finally had to tell them today. I was like, I stopped sending y'all stuff because it keeps getting crazier and crazier, and I just can't bring myself to send that information. Y'all can look at the news yourself, man. I can't keep you up to date.
I have not looked at the news in a week. I mean, really, literally, I have a couple of headlines have assaulted me just through email or whatever, but I haven't read any articles. I haven't watched any nothing.
Good.
Taking care of myself.
Yeah. Well, I think I told you, like, deleting the Facebook app was good.
Right.
I've went through and deleted a ton of people on social media.
Okay.
I went through on the day after and saw a lot of people bragging. I was like, okay, bye-bye.
No, yeah.
You don't get to occupy space in my life or brain.
No. I'm really thinking I might like this no news thing.
Yeah.
And we can start recording whenever you're ready, whatever.
We're already going.
We're already going. Okay. Yeah. I'm really not listening.
Sean Pointner had done a thing years ago where he took a full year and said, I'm not going to look at any news, but if it happens to find me, then I'll know about it. And we would hang out like once a week.
So did you make it for a year?
Yep.
That's awesome.
And then I would say, okay, well, here's something you missed. And I would tell him about something that happened. And he was good with that. He was like, yeah, it's good to actually get some stuff, but not be bombarded by it.
So I wonder what he learned from doing that for that long.
I don't know, because I will tell you he's gone back to
Sure.
Because I think we talked about the other night where he was like, I'm thinking about doing that again. I was like, you probably, I don't know, now's the time, but yeah, now is probably the time to do that.
I'm a news junkie, so it's kind of hard for me. I catch myself clicking on those apps, on my phone. But I did it 8 years ago, which I don't know if you remember what was happening 8 years ago.
I don't know.
Well, there was a Bob Dylan concert in Knoxville. I do remember that. It was the day after people voted for something. But anyway, I did it for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
I think it was 6 weeks. It was until Christmas break.
Okay.
And I remember that because I remember when I returned to it, it was with real open eyes. I was sitting with my dad having coffee in on the Gulf Coast, and which is normally like a happy place for me, right? Mm-hmm. And I felt myself getting anxious. And I thought, why am I getting anxious? What is this about? He had the television on. It was on the Weather Channel, right?
Yeah.
The Weather Channel people were yelling at me. It was that whole fake intensity thing they do when, like, they want you to think that this is a really pressing thing, right? And we have a cold front, and it's going to come down here, and it's going to dump 5 feet of snow. We really, and I realized it was their tone that was making me anxious because I hadn't heard that tone in a while, and it was the first time I paid attention to that tone. And so here I was on the Gulf Coast in Alabama getting anxious about a snowstorm that was 2,000 miles away from me, right?
Oh, God.
So it was like one of those moments. Okay, so there's lots of other stuff that you get anxious about from the news or whatever that is not going to impact you or that you have no control over, even if it does.
Yeah.
And so that was one of my big takeaways from that period.
I can't tell you the last time I watched TV news because it seems so aggressively, we are the ones to have found this information. I was like, who cares? I read it on Twitter 2 hours ago.
And everything's breaking news when it's really not news.
No.
It's not even hardly news, let alone is it breaking or some kind of big important thing.
No, I can't remember what the hell the story was. It was, I guess it would have been somewhere around 6-7 months ago. Mm-hmm. The thing that tipped me over the edge to actually send me to see a therapist was reading about Israel and Palestine and having an anxiety attack at work that I thought I was going to have a heart attack.
Wow.
Just sitting at my desk. And I stopped for like 5 whole minutes. I was like, couldn't breathe.
Right.
Heart felt like it was going to jump out of my throat. And that was the point where I was like, I need to go talk to somebody. I need to not look at this, and I need to go talk to somebody. And so, that would have been 6-7 months ago, I think. We
only consume news when we consume it, and I'm not right now, but by reading it. And read it because it takes away that tone.
Yeah.
I decide what the tone is in my head, and I decide if this is urgent or not. And also, I don't have to watch a 3-minute news story that really has information in it I don't want, either because I'm not interested or because it makes me upset.
Yeah.
I can just read the first 3 sentences of that article and say, I'm not going to read that because I really don't want to know about those abused children or, whatever it is that I can't do anything about.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of, if there was news being made right now, for example, it might be a lot of news that I can't do anything about anyway. And so I cannot let myself spend the next however many years it might be being depressed or angry all the time. And I think a lot of people live in that outrage place. And that's not good for any human.
Well, I say this with no sense of arrogance when I say this. With what happened last Tuesday, the concern I have for what I may do, not to myself, but to others, is of great import to me right now. To where I need to talk to the therapist about that and figure out, how do I handle that? Because I don't have with what happened last Tuesday, I don't have something stopping me anymore.
Right.
And if somebody says something or does something in front of me, I know my own strength, and I know if I don't have that thing to stop me, that it could be like, all right, I'm fine with going to jail.
Right.
And just, I'm a little scared of that. And I'm not scared for those people. I'm scared for myself.
Right.
I think is the best way to put it.
Well, and I think we all have to know ourselves, and we have to take care of ourselves. And I'm not afraid of having the conversation or whatever with whomever, but I don't need to. I just don't. I don't need that. Somebody told me I was paraphrasing Voltaire, and I didn't know that because I've never read Voltaire. That sounds very educated. I should have said, well, as Voltaire said. But
edit that.
Yeah, right. You got me on the tone, as Voltaire said. What I've been telling people is, I need to tend my own garden. I need to plow my own field. And what is my field? Well, it's my family, it's my friends, it's people I care about.
Yeah.
And it's Knoxville.
Yeah.
That's my job, is downtown Knoxville. And nothing changed last Wednesday morning in those things.
Yeah.
So I need to take care of those things.
That's been a big thing with the therapist talking to me about. He was like, find your joy. This is 4 months ago.
Yep.
He's like, what do you think will bring you joy? I was like, well, this is going to be hilarious considering the pre-recorded conversation. I was like, I have a lot of clutter in my house, and it gets on my head.
Oh, do you have clutter in your house, Jody? You should have shown me your clutter before we started. I hadn't noticed your clutter.
So I had been getting up and walking every morning at 6:45, and I was like, what if I shifted it to I have to do something to handle some bit of clutter, like Tuesdays and Thursdays. I was like, that's how my brain works. Walk on Mondays and Wednesdays, clean Tuesdays and Thursdays. Well, I ended up just getting up and walking every day. And so I was like, I probably need to drop some LBs, especially before we get into winter season.
Right.
I was like, so that's more of a focus now. And this stuff, because I've been gone, it doesn't bother me.
But with walking, you have the whole endorphin thing. I mean, there's something to be said for getting out and being in the natural world.
Yeah.
For me, living downtown, I don't have a lot of nature around, but to me, just walking downtown, just walking the streets, it brings me joy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See? Yeah. And I also don't feel so tired when I get to work.
Yeah.
There's something about that too.
Starts your day in a whole different kind of way.
Instead of just railing an entire pot of coffee.
Yeah. The thing for me, you talk about reclaiming joy and that sort of thing. And this is a theme in our family as well. So it's interesting you think that way too. My daughter has a tattoo that says joy on her arm. And I had a sister who died at birth, and her name was Joy. Oh. So that's part of the reason she has that. But the other reason is that my brother always told my daughter, who would always stress about everything, she's a teacher and she would always be worried about stuff. And he said, you've got to find the joy. So that's it's a theme for us.
Yeah.
And one of the things that has happened is now that I'm not reading so much news, I have time.
Yeah.
And I've returned, at least for now, and I hope I can maintain it, to reading books, which I loved.
Yeah.
It brings me joy.
Yeah.
But I got away from because, that quick fix of you can read a little quick article on the phone,
Yeah.
instead of picking up an actual book.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the last trip I took to Chicago, there's a book over there that I took with me, and I plowed through it. And then got home, and I was like, got back to the normal thing. I was like, crap.
So easy, right?
Like, that's another reason that the stack that is by the 2001 Space Odyssey Laserdisc back there.
Yeah.
To paint a picture. That stack is like, all of these need to be read in the next year. I want, if nothing else, that one stack to be read in the next year.
I'm thinking about journaling over the next, I don't know, say 4 years.
Oh, yeah.
What I read, and trying to make it a journey that I kind of document. And
yeah.
Like right now I'm reading, I just finished a book on Greenwich Village, which is a place that I hold near and dear, go to every year. And it was like a 800-page history of Greenwich Village. It was awesome. It was awesome. But I finished that. I was close to finish with that when I returned to reading. And now I'm reading Year of the Monkey by Patti Smith.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I love her Just Kids.
Yeah.
I fell in love with that book. And then when she came to Big Ears, I fell in love with her more than I ever have. And she lives in Greenwich Village, so there's this big tie-in, right? So right now I'm reading Year of the Monkey, and it's a copy that I bought in Greenwich Village at a little bookstore that we love, and it's autographed. So every time I pick it up, I think, Patty held this book.
Yeah.
And I'm holding this book.
That's awesome.
And I feel a connection, right?
Yeah,
So,
that's great. Okay, Greenwich Village. Where are you originally from?
so I'm originally from Mobile, Alabama.
Okay.
If I'm being really specific, Citronelle, Alabama, which is a tiny little former oil town. It was kind of a boom town in the late 50s when I was born. Had oil rigs kind of all around. But it's a tiny little town in the northern end of Mobile County. So I usually tell people I was born in Mobile, but really I was born in Citronelle in a doctor's office because there was no hospital. So the doctor had a couple of rooms where babies were birthed. And so my mama was a teenager at the time, and but married to my dad. And they had me in the doctor's office and took me back to the house trailer that my grandfather had helped them finance, and they put out on his land.
Wow. Okay.
So it was a very, very auspicious beginning.
I was looking at. I was like, man, I have heard of Citronelle, Alabama.
Yeah?
And I don't know where from, because I was trying to think in the film Big Fish.
Oh, yes.
He goes to that.
He may well, because that's set right down there.
I think it may be there, but he goes to that. He finds that town in the middle of the woods.
Town in the middle of the woods.
That's where Loudon Wainwright, if you've seen the film, Loudon Wainwright III is the mayor of the town or whatever.
I have not seen the movie. I think I read the book. I've got the book.
That's my favorite Tim Burton film. That's probably in top 50 for me. It is a very, like, it'll make you cry. Like, it's a beautiful movie.
Right.
But there's a point in it where he goes into this little town in the middle of Alabama. It's in the middle of the woods, but it turns out that town is still there, wherever it's at.
Right.
And I thought it was Citronelle, but I looked on the Wikipedia page. It is not there. But I can't remember where that...
It's got to be close by, because all of it was set right down in that area.
And I can't remember if they built the town for the film or if it was already... they had to have built it, because it's a full town, like downtown.
Interesting.
Well, I'm overselling it. It's a bunch of shacks.
Right. Well, I mean, that's what most small towns in South Alabama are.
What did your folks do for a living?
So my dad had worked in the oil field.
Yeah.
And when he got out of the Navy, his dad and most of the family that was left they were living in Citronelle because they were working in the oil field.
Okay.
So Dad came there, because that's where his parents were, and got a job in the oil field. But growing up, my dad, he always told the story, and now I can never remember it precisely, but it was something like in fourth grade, he went to 5 different schools because his dad worked in the oil field, and they moved around.
Oh, okay.
And so at age 10 or whatever he was, he says that he said, he's dead now, but he said he made the decision that when he had a family, he would never work in the oil field. So when my mom got pregnant, he quit his job in the oil field and went to work for Scott Paper Company.
Oh, okay.
And took a pay cut, and but we would stay in the same place. And so he worked his whole career at the paper company.
Okay.
And which was really good to us. He got promoted through the years and eventually had a really good job there. And my mom took care of the kids, me and my brother, until I was probably 12, and she went to nursing school.
Okay.
And that was the first toe anybody in our family had ever stuck into college. I had the first 4-year degree of anybody in the family.
And your brother was older or younger?
Younger.
Younger than you.
Yeah, 6 years.
And was your sister Joy, were you the first one?
I was the first one born.
Okay.
Then they had Joy,
Yeah.
who died, and they were told they would never have another child. And my brother came along,
Yeah.
which is why my mother loved him the best. And if he was here, he would say, "Yeah."
Oh, okay. How many years difference was there?
There was about 5.5, 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is a very, in similar fashion, me and my sister, there's 11 and a half years difference.
That's a big difference.
And my mom, if I remember correctly, had like 4 or 5 miscarriages in between the two of us. And she was 39 when my sister was born, I think.
Wow.
And Dad was 40, which in
So your
1990...
sister's younger.
Yes.
Okay.
So my dad, in 1990, that was a big deal for someone to be 39 and 40 having a kid. That was not as normal, I guess, as it is now.
Right.
But yeah, I still remember once we were in Myrtle Beach and she had a miscarriage while we were on vacation, which is just fucking terrible.
Yeah.
But-
We've gone through miscarriages ourselves, but also with friends, and it's, especially if they're longing for a child, it's so hard.
But yeah, 11 and a half years difference. They got a built-in babysitter with me.
That's huge. So what is your relationship like with her?
Comes and goes, peaks
Okay.
and valleys.
Uh-huh.
Like, she still lives with my dad. So,
Okay.
still here in Knoxville. And, yeah. I took her to a lot of concerts when she was a kid.
Oh, neat.
Took her to see Elvis Costello,
Nice.
Lou Reed.
God, I never saw Lou Reed. I wish I had.
He had to have someone help him on stage. And I want to think he passed away not long after we saw him at it was at Tennessee.
Yeah. I didn't get into him until, like the last several years, really.
Yeah.
And now I appreciate him a lot more than I did at the time.
One of my buddies, Michael May, he's going through, I think, the 500 albums from Rolling Stone or whatever. He's trying to listen to them in order. Mm-hmm. And he's like, man, these Velvet Underground albums are he loves like Duran Duran. And he was like, these Velvet Underground albums are hard to get through.
That's interesting.
And I was like, dude, listen to this one.
Uh-huh.
And I was pointing him. I was like, I think you'll like this one. Is it Loaded or it may just be the self-titled one. Whatever one, I was like, but listen to this song first. Don't go through it like in order. I know you won't go through it in order. That's fine.
Uh-huh.
But listen to like these 3 songs first and then listen to it in order. And he was like, once I started listening to the Lou Reed solo stuff, I got it a little bit more. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you a recent experience I had with that.
Okay.
So I'm walking down Gay Street, it's 1 a.m. or something, walking back from a friend's house. And I don't know, it was really, some nights just have a thing. I don't know. And it was just one of those nights that kind of had a thing. But I was watching my surroundings, making sure I didn't, get waylaid on the way down Gay Street. And I had one of those moments, just kind of like the one I described earlier with my dad, where I got anxious and I had to kind of analyze, why am I anxious, right?
Yeah.
So I had this moment where I was like feeling this like joy or happiness, this moment of something. And I'm just walking down Gay Street. Like, what's going on here? And then I realized I was hearing the song Pale Blue Eyes coming out of the karaoke bar.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm thinking, who picked that? Why did they have that?
Yeah.
How's this happening in 2024
Yeah.
on Gay Street in Knoxville from a karaoke bar? But the person who was doing it, of course, it's not a hard song to sing, but it was good.
Yeah.
And it was sort of like I'm walking through the Village and it's 1972 and I'm hearing Lou Reed from the basement of a bar,
I had one of those moments where I was sitting out back of Pretentious Beer. We were sitting in the back and there were 3 or 4 of us, and it was like an autumn night where it's a little bit chilly. Mm-hmm. And you look up and you see all these high rises of like people's where they're living.
Right.
And I just looked at my buddy. I was like, I feel like I'm in New York. This feels like something you would see in New York.
Right.
You'd be sitting in a bar in Brooklyn and see all the high
Right.
rises. I was like, such a surreal moment. I was like, I also had that moment when I was sitting in Brooklyn with a friend because how we grew up was pretty rough. And I looked at her at one point. I was like, did you think we would be here? Because she was living in Brooklyn. She was like, nope. And I was like, neither did I. I can't believe we made it out. Like, it was literally a moment where we were sitting there and thinking the opposite way of back here, being like, we made it out.
And there's a hopeful note for these times, right?
Yeah.
There's a hopeful note because we make it out.
Yeah.
I mean, we usually make it out.
Yeah. What is it? The only way out is through.
Right.
I don't know who said that. You know who said that? Voltaire.
Damn straight he did. I read it
Okay. So
when I was reading my volumes of Voltaire.
your tomes.
Yes,
tomes
the
of Voltaire.
tomes.
Okay, so you're growing up in Alabama. Did you really get into reading or writing as a kid, or were you into art of any kind?
Yeah, I mean, what you see is what you get pretty much
Okay.
with me. I don't know that I'm like that different than when I was 3 or something.
Okay.
No, I love to read, man.
Okay.
I always loved to read. As a 3-year-old, I would read Voltaire at night.
I would have a hard time getting to sleep because I was just so
Exactly.
I was engrossed in
exactly.
Voltaire.
That's the word. No, in that era, and this tells you a lot about the area or the time in history. There was no library in the town where we lived. We moved from Citronelle to Saraland, which is as big as it sounds. It's bigger now, actually, than it used to be. And then we moved to Satsuma,
Okay.
which is where I grew up a lot of my years. Then we moved back to Saraland. But there was no public library. So the bookmobile would come around.
Oh yeah.
And it was this van that had air conditioning, and we did not have air conditioning.
Yeah.
And so you would go and they would open these doors and whoosh,
Yeah.
the air. And you would go in and you could smell the books. And you had the run of the van, which doesn't sound big, but it seemed huge, as a kid. Yeah. And so I read a lot of indigenous books, like books about Native Americans, which probably, if I could go back and get my hands on some of those now, they were probably racist as they could be.
Yeah.
Who knows? But I didn't know that at the time.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of that kind of thing. And then I started reading some history, and so that's always been a thread for me, I guess. That kind of reading. I mean, one of my all-time favorite books that was really important for me. I read it in high school, I guess. It was "Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee." D. Brown.
Yeah.
I mean, it was one of my first glimpses of the real America.
Yeah.
So, and I have several copies of that book today. I mean, I just love that. I still have that original one that I read in high school. I always read. And then the other thing that's, no different for me now than then is I always loved music.
Yeah.
And early it was country music. Hank Williams was my first hero, no question about it. Then I went through a little Elvis flirtation because you had to in the South, and Johnny Cash.
Yeah.
And then at age 12, I found the Jewish Messiah.
Okay, I gotta go on a sidetrack.
For anybody who ever might hear this, that means Bob Dylan.
I mean, God, now I can't remember. Robert Lowenstein? No. What is his real name?
Oh, Zimmerman.
Zimmerman.
Yeah.
Zimmerman.
Yeah. Robert Allen Zimmerman, by the way. We share, a middle name.
Have you seen the trailers? I assume you have.
Absolutely.
What are you thinking?
I'm hopeful.
Okay.
I'm excited about it because I will tell you, this is like nobody in the world's going to be interested in hearing this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. So I was a young Dylan fan. I am a young Dylan fan.
Okay.
I mean, when Like a Rolling Stone hit and just took the country and he became an international superstar, I was 6 years old. I didn't know anything about it. I was listening to the Grand Ole Opry.
Yeah.
My family and I would go to the Grand Ole Opry and stuff, and those were my stars. So I'm young for a Dylan fan. So as a result, and as a teenager, when I became a Dylan fan, I didn't have any friends who shared that at all. So I was the Lone Ranger on Bob Dylan-ness. So I never had any hope that my daughter would ever care for Bob Dylan. This is getting to the Timothy Chalamet movie.
Okay. I was thinking
it's
in my
going
head,
there.
I was like, but he also teamed up with Johnny from Girl from North Country. You would think there would be some people from in the country that would be like, oh, well, Johnny Cash.
No, my friends were mostly into early disco and garbage stuff, just real garbage.
Although I've come around on disco.
There are certain bands that I've realized I dismissed them as disco, and really they were way better than the genre.
I'm not a Bee Gees fan.
No,
but there's some of that stuff.
Is, oh my God.
Some of that Donna Summer.
Yeah,
some of that.
I haven't gotten to that, but like Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Oh yeah,
they're just so good, and they're not really even disco.
No,
but at the time, I just grouped them all.
Well, and of course, the greatest disco band of all time, Kiss. I mean, I was made for loving you, baby.
Oh my gosh! See, a lot of my friends were into that. They were they were into Kiss, and I just couldn't go there.
Okay, but
anyway, so I'm a young Dylan fan. I never imagined my daughter would be a Dylan fan. Didn't try to push it on her. Yeah. But of course, it was in the air. I mean, you can't live in my house and not have it in the air. And for her 13th birthday, she said, I said, "What do you want? It's a big birthday." She said, "I want to go see Bob Dylan wherever he is." Shocked me. So I took her to Chattanooga. We saw Bob Dylan. And so we've seen him together probably 30 times or
Holy
so
crap.
now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
so
amazing.
we traveled. So she's a Dylan fan. I'm a Dylan fan. I feel so blessed, right? Well, fast forward another 25 years.
Yeah.
And Timothy Chalamet is going to play Bob Dylan in a biopic. And guess who's a big Timothy Chalamet fan? My granddaughter.
Oh, man.
She's already seen Bob Dylan in concert because I'm her grandfather.
Of course.
So, we did that as a three-generation.
And your daughter is her mom.
That's right. Exactly. So she was messed up from the beginning. So she had seen Bob Dylan, and I had talked to her just, about, well, he's more than just our favorite singer guy.
Yeah.
He's important, and, it's hard for, she's 15 now to conceptualize that. But over time, it's kind of seeped in because she hears this song in movies and she hears this, and it's kind of coming at her culturally. And she loves Timothy Chalamet for reasons not related to Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
And so she's gotten like super hyped about this movie. So she's making me watch every trailer. So recently, and I thought, well, okay, so she likes Timothy Chalamet. I mean, she likes Bob Dylan, but she's going to tolerate it because of him. Well, recently she was over at our house and she was wearing one of my Bob Dylan T-shirts. I said, "You're wearing my Bob Dylan T-shirt again." I said, "So, like, am I going to need to buy you a Bob Dylan T-shirt?" Being sarcastic, right? She said, "Well, yeah.
Christmas is coming up."
I said, "Okay." Well, she texted me the next day with a link to the one that she wants. And I've got her a Dylan album, so she'll have Dylan vinyl too. Awesome. So yes, we've been watching the trailers. What do I think about it? I'm hopeful.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they did a pretty good job of making him look like like Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a funny meme about that in a minute, but the other way around. But I'm a little disheartened because there's one trailer where they messed it up.
Oh, okay.
So
see, that's the problem with being the Uber fan.
That's right.
Yeah.
But this is an important moment. There's a moment, and it was at Manchester for years. People thought it was at Royal Albert Hall, but it wasn't. It's in Manchester, England, and it's on his 65 or 6 tour, and it's a famous bootleg that finally got put out, right? And in it, he turns to the band. He's being booed because he's got the electric instruments. And he says, "Play fucking loud."
Yeah.
And he screams it. And then that drum just smashes down and they go into a raucous version of Like a Rolling Stone.
Yeah.
It is a seminal rock and roll moment.
Yeah.
And in the movie, he cleans up the language. And I don't mind cleaning up language.
Maybe for the trailer.
That's what my granddaughter's insisting, so I'm keeping an open mind. But, you know, if they do it anyway, I mean, that's not going to ruin the movie for me, but I hope they don't make a lot of compromises like that. You know, I know they've got to truncate the story. They've got to make it into a narrative. I get all that.
Well, I will say, so it's because I know it's being directed by James Mangold, who's the guy who did Walk the Line, who did a great job with that film.
Very good movie.
So that gives me hope. I was trying to see if it said what it was rated, because I'm a movie nerd, so I know that at PG-13 you can get away with one F word. So
really?
If they choose
In the whole
to
movie?
use that, or it may be of like when he does it, he strums the guitar, and that you can't. He says it, but they blur it. But I am curious if they're going to. It doesn't say what it is rated on Wiki.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's James Mangold. So, it's rated R.
Okay.
There's a strong chance it's going to say it.
Okay. Yeah, my granddaughter explained trailers to the old man and said, you know, it's perhaps possible
Yes.
that's the case. And so we're all excited about it.
Okay.
All three of us will go see it, Three Generations.
Yeah.
The day after Christmas. It comes out Christmas Day.
Okay.
But family obligations and whatnot, my daughter said, we'll see it the next day. I said, well, I'll go ahead and see it, and I'll go with y'all. And that didn't fly. I was not given permission to do that. So.
Now I got to stay on this for a second.
Okay.
What did you watch the Todd Haynes film where all the different people played him?
I did.
What did you think of that one?
I thought it was a really interesting thing. I mean, they were, you know, they were trying to do a particular thing, and I didn't think it was bad at all.
There was part of me that when this got announced, I was like, but we had that film, and that film was such an interesting take on it.
It was.
And his stories never line up. So
Right.
it's like, I kind of liked.
Yeah.
And Kate Blanchett, I thought was absolutely
She was great.
fantastic.
She was great.
Could have done with less Richard Gere. I'm not a Richard Gere fan.
There's a meme going around that has a picture of Bob Dylan, and it is I have learned is not a Dylan quote.
Oh, okay.
But it sounds so much like something he would say. So it's a picture of Dylan saying in the caption, I'm going to get me a Timothy Chalamet mask, and I'm going to play him in a biopic and let him see how it feels, man.
I could see him say
Yeah, totally, right?
I never saw Masked and Anonymous.
I like that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of people in it. Holy
It does.
crap.
I mean, and when Cheech Marin comes on screen, it's like, oh, I just love that guy.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of those movies, I don't think there's ever been a movie made about him that captured him in a way that appeals to a large audience. And so I think most people would see Masked and Anonymous and see it as terrible. To me, it's interesting for 1,000 different reasons that have nothing to do with whether it's really a great movie or not.
And then Inside Llewyn Davis, I love the Coen brothers, but I did not like. I think it was everybody was just so mean in that film. I was like, it just made me walk away.
There were parts of it that were
wanted
hard to
love
watch.
That film.
Yeah,
I wanted to love that film so much.
Yeah,
but I've only watched it the one time in the theater. But I thought ending with him coming in there and sing, because I did not know who Dave Van Ronk was, and that made me look into him.
Right.
I was like, but having it end with Dylan, I was like, oh, okay, that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, that scene. Of course, all the scenes are in Greenwich Village, or almost all of it, which is part of the reason we love Greenwich Village. But our favorite cafe is Cafe Reggio on McDougal Street, and part of it was filmed in there. So that's kind of another connection that we enjoy.
One of the times I was in New York, I stumbled in there and had lunch.
Did you really?
Yeah.
How cool.
Yeah. You
didn't mean to, and you just...
Nope.
Wow.
I was looking for somewhere to eat, and I happened to be in that area, and I pulled up. I was like, this sounds good.
Wow. Yeah, The Godfather, part of The Godfather was filmed in there, in the little window, and part of Shaft, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. God. I love Shaft.
I got to go back. I will say I have not seen the original Shaft in a while, but here in the last year, I watched the Samuel Jackson one for the first time, which was not good. And then I watched the newer one that was Shaft's grandson.
Hmm.
It was Shaft's grandson, Samuel L. Jackson, and Richard Roundtree.
Huh.
And it was
Wow.
this is close to being a good movie.
Uh-huh.
But this is not a good
Well,
movie.
I don't think Shaft was probably, the original was really a good movie.
That's why I say I haven't seen it in a long time.
Yeah, I don't think it was a good movie.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It was just, it captured a minute in New York City that was kind of cool. And the theme from Shaft, I mean, Isaac Hayes, I mean, to me, that is a masterwork and understatement. It is just such a cool
That film
record.
for me is The Taking of Pelham 123 with Walter Matthau. Have you never seen that? Oh my God. I almost want to play the theme because to bring up Sean Pointner again, when I was showing films at the Central Collective, I was like, I'm going to show Taking of Pelham 123. He's like, what's that? And I was like, let me just play you the theme. And like 3 seconds in, he was like, I'm in. I got to see this movie.
So who did the theme?
David, I don't know. It's nobody big.
Huh.
It's a David Shire. David, God, will it pull up? This is always a weird thing. While I'm looking this up, I will rant for a second. I don't like one thing that made something like Shaft work was that it was in the theater for a long time and people found it. Whereas now, like that Saturday night film, because I just saw a trailer, it was in and out of the theater in less than 2 weeks.
Right.
And I was like, I really want to see that in a theater. But I couldn't because it was just gone.
Right.
And it really pissed me off. So in this, it's Walter Matthau, Robert Shaw from Jaws,
Okay.
Jerry Stiller, Ben Stiller's dad.
Right.
It's got a lot of people in it. And it's
US Cellular has
oh my God, the ads.
16 Pros.
We're getting added to death. Here we go. Like, it's just 70s big horns.
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to find this on vinyl, and it's proving impossible. But yeah, that's it. David Shire.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
They remade it with Denzel and John Travolta, and that film sucks. And if you know anything about Tarantino, so the Reservoir Dogs, it's Mr. Pink, Mr. White, all that. That's from Taking Up Pelham 123. That's a dad film. When I was like 8 years old, my dad sat me down and he's like, "You got to watch this movie." And he made me watch it.
I'll have to watch that.
It is very good.
Is set in New York City?
New York City. These four guys hijack a subway train, and it's got some.
Oh, I vaguely remember that.
It's got some, of course, in 2024, some inappropriate language, of course. But Walter Matthau and Jerry Stiller are so wryly funny in that film. Imagine that.
Right.
Walter Matthau, there's still one scene and I was like, this is one of those, it doesn't make me laugh out loud, but that's one of the funniest things I've ever seen in a movie.
Wow.
Like, and I don't want to spoil it. Whenever you see it.
Yeah, please don't, because
I will tell you
watch
afterwards. It is one of those blink and you miss it moments. He says something, and it's just like, oh my God. It's great. Anyway, so you're in Alabama. You're into reading. At what point did you start writing? Did you start creating your own stories?
So, I always enjoyed writing, but never thought about it until I was in middle school.
Okay.
And I wanted to be a rock star. I mean, because, I'm in middle school. And so I willed myself to be able to play chords on a guitar. It was really hard for me, no musical talent at all. And my brother had ultimately got a master's degree in piano performance. He had so much talent.
Holy crap.
Just amazing. I mean, he would be passed off from one teacher to another because they would like immediately just say, yeah, I can't teach him anything. So they would give him to somebody else. Meanwhile, I'm trying to learn 3 chords on a guitar. And then I'm really trying, after I can make them on my left hand, I'm trying to make my right hand do something that resembles a rhythm. And then I'm really trying to sing while I do those things.
Yeah.
So I started writing songs, and was going to be the next Bob Dylan, right?
Of course.
Little did I know I would be an old man and the original guy would still be being Bob Dylan, right? So, like, joke's on me. Anyway, so I started doing that, and by college had figured out that I had no musical ability, and so writing melodies was not a thing for me. Lyrically, I thought it was, pretty decent. So what do you do if you can't write music, but you can write words? You do poetry, because that's what,
Of course,
lyrics are, right? And so I took a deep dive into poetry and wrote it for years, through my 20s and 30s. Ultimately took some classes and so forth, and realized that I really there was something missing with poetry. So I tried every kind of writing. I wrote a novel, and it was terrible. And then I thought, well, I realized I really hadn't read like I needed to read if I wanted to be a novelist. I hadn't read the great novels.
okay.
So in my 30s, I really spent a lot of time reading the classics,
Lady Chatterley's Lover.
right, that kind of thing. Absolutely.
I wanted to say that earlier. And I was like,
Well, there's your chance. There you go. You took it.
sorry.
That's okay. Now, I read a lot of Faulkner, and I read,
Yeah.
Steinbeck and those guys, and ultimately, after the bad novel, started writing short stories.
Okay.
And I thought, okay, I need to break it down here and get good at these short pieces, and then try to, So I was still working at that, and I was in a short story group, and reading each other's work and all that kind of thing. And I actually I got one short story published, and then we moved downtown. And a writer friend of mine said, after midnight one night over chocolate cake and a lot of red wine, you should write it. You should write it. Because I was telling her nobody was really paying attention to downtown.
Yeah.
It's 2009. Metropulse had Michael Haynes' Shot of Urban once a month that was about downtown, something about downtown. And they were known as the downtown paper, but there weren't a lot of articles specifically about downtown, because there wasn't anything happening in downtown. There wasn't a lot to write about.
And by 2009, they had gotten bought out by the Sentinel.
Yeah, so it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
But anyway, so she encouraged me to start the blog, and that's when I started doing that, and that very soon, very quickly overwhelmed any other kind of writing I was doing, so I stopped the other.
Okay, but I'm going to go back in time. So you said
Sure.
you're the first person with a 4-year degree.
Mm-hmm.
What was your degree in?
So my original degree was psychology,
Okay.
because I enjoyed it. So I very easily could have flipped into history or literature, either one.
Okay.
But I really fell in love with psychology, and in fact, 30 hours were required for a major in psychology, and I had 57 by the time I finished. I tried to take every psychology class the college offered, and so then I had this conversation with a professor, one of my psychology professors at my senior year, and I was already married, got married before my senior year, and he said, "So what are you doing after college?" And I said, "Well, I can get a job, right? That's what you do." I mean, that's all I knew about the world.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't know anything about colleges. Looking back, I could have probably had more wide choices of colleges to attend, if somebody had helped me.
Where did you go to college?
It's a small Baptist college in Mobile, Mobile College.
Okay.
That's now Mobile University. They got fancy after I left. But anyway, I said, well, I can get a job, right? Because you go to college and then you get a job. And he laughed out loud. And he said, "You've got a degree in psychology. What do you think you're going to do?" I said, I mean, I don't know what jobs there are. He said, "There aren't any." He said, "You have to go to graduate school," which was a newsflash to me. I mean, here I am, the first to cross the finish line with a bachelor's, and he's talking about graduate school. So I studied counseling. We went to the University of Florida. He connected me up with a guy he knew there. So we moved to Gainesville, and I got a master's and an EDS in counseling. And then years later, Karen, my wife, got a degree in psychology from UT, And then she went back for a master's in information sciences to study to be a librarian.
Okay.
And I was burned out on counseling by then, and really liked what she was studying. So it kind of came back to books in the end. So I got a master's in information sciences from UT as well.
Okay.
So we were both librarians.
A better school.
I'm just going to say next topic.
We beat him this year. That's all I got to say. Okay.
Could have very easily gone the other way, but you did. You did. You certainly did.
That game scared the crap. Every game has scared the crap out of me except for like the first three. Okay, but you both UT and librarians.
Yeah.
Which I feel like I'm saying that word weird.
Librarians.
Librarians.
You got to put that extra R in there.
Yeah. Where were you all librarians at?
So she was kind of all over at different schools in Knox County.
Oh, okay.
Actually ended her career at Whittle Springs, so very close to here.
That's
in
where
the
I
neighborhood.
went to middle school.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I was almost exclusively at one school in Oak Ridge. It was Jefferson Middle School in Oak Ridge.
Okay.
And yeah, our daughter teaches there now, and she's in her 18th year there, and I did almost all of my career there.
That's awesome. Okay, so you do that, and then do you retire, or is there something next after that?
So I've got like a 15-year statute of limitations on careers. That's what I figured out about myself, right? So I did counseling for about 16.
Okay.
One too many.
Yeah.
And then
One
I did,
to grow on.
Yeah. And then I did librarianship for 13 years.
Okay.
And at that point, I had enough years in the public schools that I could retire.
Yeah.
With full retirement. So, and the blog was already happening.
Okay.
So I saw a pathway to maybe make it financially.
Yeah.
I hoped, and just do the blog full time. So that's when I, in 2014, made that transition.
Okay. So was Karen still working?
She worked until 17.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Man, Brett.
Yeah, somebody had to bring money home, man. I was gonna be sitting in my pajamas, you know.
I got coffee to drink downtown.
That's right.
Like,
That's right.
Come on, man. Oh my God. When did you all move down? What year did you all move downtown?
Downtown was we moved to Knox County in '82, so we've lived in the area since '82.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm from Knoxville, although lately there's been lots of discussion on the website about interlopers, so maybe I'm still an interloper. But anyway, we moved downtown in 2009.
Okay. I'm trying to think. 2009. The paper was gone from downtown at that point.
Mm-hmm.
They just moved to the new building.
Mm-hmm.
Which this may be an off-air conversation. I got into a conversation with somebody about what is going on with that building, and it is, as someone who worked there 2 different stints, it is very sad.
With the quote new, new Sentinel building.
Yeah,
it's mostly empty, isn't it?
They're renting it out, but I should not be upset because I got laid off the second time I was there.
There you go.
Yeah. The biggest bone of contention I have is, why didn't I get a free subscription to USA Today or any Gannett paper for the rest of my life because you laid me off? I shouldn't have to pay
surely, yeah,
$1.99 a month or whatever.
I mean, as severance goes, that's not a big package.
No,
really.
I should have been able to get that, but they also sold the company, or they changed owners right at that time, so they probably would have figured that. Anyway, they would have figured out a way around that.
Yeah, it is sad to consider what has happened. I guess with media nationally, it's not just them;
No.
it's everywhere.
No, and that same person was telling me about the paper in Asheville and how they only have one photographer on staff. And I was like, and that Asheville paper covers a lot of Western North Carolina.
Right.
And he was like, not anymore.
Right.
Because they can't. They got one person.
My hometown, Mobile, Alabama, which is a larger population area than Knoxville. It is.
Okay.
Yeah. Does not have a daily paper anymore.
Really?
There's AL.com.
Okay, yeah.
So there's one newspaper that basically covers the state, which explains some things if you think about it a little bit.
Hell, since you've been here this long, you've known there used to be the Journal and the News
Right.
Sentinel.
Right.
Almost like fighting against one another.
Right. And that's
And Metropulse. Then you add Metropulse,
Right.
and they're like,
growing up, that's the way Mobile was too.
Yeah.
We had the Mobile Press and the Mobile Register, and then they became the Mobile Press Register. Then they got smaller and smaller. I'll tell you though, it's national.
yeah.
I was in New York City in June, and on a Sunday morning, we decided we were going to just chill. We didn't know it, but we both had COVID, which explains why we were trying to slow down. So yeah, let's just hang out,
Yeah.
So I thought, what would be more wonderful than getting a paper copy of the New York Times?
Yeah.
I read the New York Times, or I did before last week, every day pretty thoroughly on
Yeah.
my phone, right? But I thought a paper Sunday New York
yeah.
Times, and I'll go to Cafe Ratio,
Yeah.
and I'll just luxuriate with my coffee and my favorite space and the New York Times. And it was interesting because, first of all, I had a hard time finding one.
Okay.
I had to ask several people who kind of scratched their heads and looked quizzically into the mid-distance. And eventually somebody said, I think maybe at the deli around the corner, they might have one. So I went around there, and sure enough, they did. So I got it. And the first thing I noticed when I picked it up was it ain't the New York Times Sunday edition of your mama.
No.
It's like, it's still thick-ish, but it's not like, I mean, that thing used to weigh
Yeah.
20 pounds,
Yeah.
So that was the kind of the wake-up moment. So then I go to Cafe Reggio, and I've read all of this already yesterday on my app, my New York
Yeah.
Times app. And I also remembered how clunky it is to deal with a newspaper.
Yeah.
So I think these little cafe tables, and I've got my coffee underneath my paper as I'm trying to, I feel like a Lucille Ball episode or something,
You got
like
millennials and Gen Z's going with their phones up, going, what is he doing?
yeah, they're probably taking pictures of me from across the
You're
room.
on Snapchat. You didn't
That's
even
right,
know.
old guy reading newspaper.
Although they would probably be the ones to get into it too.
They
They'd be
might,
like, it's retro.
yeah, because
Oh, yeah.
it's cool again.
I remember growing up, and I would go and get the paper at the box for Dad or Mom, and pulling in the Sunday paper. And it was back when it was the big paper,
Right.
Not when it was thin, and it was like nuts. And I would always be like, "Okay, here you go. You all sorted. Here's the comics.
Yeah, right.
Okay, I'm gonna read the comics.
Yeah.
Before you all can get to them. Okay, so y'all moved here to Knox County in '82.
And then downtown in
in
09.
09. This always becomes a sticking point because I've got friends who moved here in like 08. And in like 2014, they're like, downtown's changed so much. I'm like, you're out of your mind. I was like, it's nothing compared to when I was a kid.
Yeah, right.
I was like, but now that's 15 years later, downtown is a completely different place.
It's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
I mean, we went downtown. I went downtown, especially me, but us as a family, a decent amount in the 80s and 90s and early aughts. Yeah, I mean, Watson's was open for a long time, so we would go to Watson's basement for their sale stuff. When my parents would come into town, we would go downtown, and mostly you had Watson's and Tomato Head, at some point.
90s or the 80s, when I was a kid, we would go to Market Square every once in a while because there was a record store on Market Square.
Yeah, there was.
We would go there, and we would come down for the Christmas parade. And then, was there ice skating on the Market Square in the 80s?
Not that I recall. I find, though, that people remember things that I didn't know were happening. And that
I
kind of
remember
thing, so.
getting hot chocolate, and I swear I thought ice skating was happening.
Could have been.
But it may have just been there was a hot chocolate vendor out
Right.
on Market Square. And because I remember going to the record store there. And but we did not go downtown. But my parents also worked so damn much. And then any time outside of work in the 80s, we were either at home watching TV or movies,
Right.
or I was playing some sport. So we were off and Dad was coaching. Like, that's occupied all our time. So we
Right.
didn't go downtown that much.
The things I remember from the 80s and 90s, Big Don's Elegant Junk
Yeah.
in the Old City. And, I don't remember some things that were there that I, learned later. Oh, yeah, that was already there. And I don't remember it. Eligaroos, which everybody talks about, of course, it was everything that everybody says it was.
Is it where Melting Pot was? Is?
Yeah.
Okay. It was, so the 80s also, or the 90s for me was 92 to probably 95, 96. Anytime I was downtown, it was Mercury. Going to see shows at the Mercury when I was woefully underage. But taking 3 girls from my art class, and we would go to the Mercury. And I remember the people on drugs in Crutch Park, what's it? Some people, I've always called it Crutch Park, but I've heard other people say Crooch.
It is Crooch.
Is it? It's the same thing with Nayland and Neeland.
Well, with Crooch, I mean, it was after Charles Crooch, right?
Okay.
And that's how he said it.
Okay.
I read recently online somewhere somebody was talking about Neeland versus Nayland again, and I think
I pronounce it both ways.
I don't know what the answer to that is.
Yeah, but Crutch,
some people were saying that they say Neyland Stadium and Neyland Drive.
Neyland Stadium, Neyland Drive. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I know. When they said that, it's like, are you kidding me? Maybe I do that too.
Yeah.
But Eligaroos in the old city was awesome. And then also, when we first, it's as hard to imagine now, given where we are in downtown Knoxville, but when we moved here in 1982 to Knoxville, there was not a coffee shop in Knoxville. Now, I don't mean a coffee shop like a Pete's. I mean a coffee shop like a proper...
Wait, what year?
Like coffee. 1982.
Okay. Because I know, and I think the 90s, there was one... but hell, Java would have been open at that point. But there was one by KMA in those houses.
Yes, the 11th Street Coffee House. Yes, I went there.
Rob Howard and Saul Young.
Mm-hmm.
I Saul Young and I were just talking the other day. I was like, I never went to that place, but I've heard the two of them talk about that place.
Yeah, I like that place a lot. Yeah. That was a proper coffee house. But I think
Java was open.
Java, I think, was the first, and I think it was maybe 91 or something in there.
Yeah.
And, of course, it was before Sean and Meg owned it. In fact, he was a customer at the time when he was a kid. And then I think Golden Roast was next on campus. I think so.
That's one that's like, I had only heard of it in like the last 10 years. I didn't realize it had been around.
I think it goes back like that.
Okay.
But yeah, there was not a coffee shop in the city. And isn't it just hard to just picture?
Especially with JFG and stuff being here, you would think.
JFG actually opened one in the JFG building at some point later on. Okay. But it was after Java had been open. So yeah, Java was like a revelation moment. And Java holds its own in the coffee world. I mean, it's really a good coffee shop in the universe.
Yeah. Although the one thing I wish everywhere would bring back, something that got taken away in the pandemic, is things staying open past 10 o'clock at night.
I have talked to Sean about that.
No, well, not only Sean, but it's like Walmart, Kroger.
Oh, okay.
Like I would go to the Martha Stewart Kroger, which is what I call the Fountain City Kroger.
Okay.
At like 1 a.m. because no one would be there.
Right.
And I could just go in and shop. And
so now they don't do that?
Nope.
Huh.
They're closed at like 11 or 10. Huh. Hell, the Fellini used to be open 24 hours a day.
Right.
And nope. They're closed, I think, at like 9 or 10 during the week. And then 11 o'clock on Friday and Saturday, which Friday and Saturday is like 11 o'clock, man. Stay open to midnight. Just
That's
something.
Interesting.
If
I did
if
not
I
know
leave a
that.
show, I'm screwed. Like,
right.
I can't get groceries.
It is a thing. I remember walking down Union Avenue and with Urban Girl, my granddaughter. She was, I guess she was 7 or 8, and we had just taken her to New York City for her first trip, right? And I said, we were talking about New York for whatever reason. I said, well, they call it the city that never sleeps. And she's like 7 or something, 8 maybe. She looked around and she said, Knoxville's the city that goes to bed by 8:30. And I said, yeah, pretty much.
My uncle, we were going to Charlotte for a UT football game few years ago, and we drove through this town in North Carolina, and my uncle looked around. He's like, I think they roll up the sidewalks here at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'd never heard that phrase.
Oh, you hadn't heard
before.
that?
I was
Oh,
like,
no,
that's
that was
amazing.
a thing. I think there actually used to be a literal, like, there were things that they hung down, like to
Wow.
give shade on the side of the street, like
Yeah.
hanging from the awnings.
Yeah.
And then you roll them up when
Yeah.
you're ready to go home. So you're rolling up the sidewalks. I
That's
think that's a
hilarious.
thing.
Uh,
I may have made that up. I'm not sure, but I think it's a thing.
the thing that I had, there are two things downtown that I have fussed about, but I can't do this.
Mhm.
But one of them is, I think 10 years ago, we could have sustained this. And I would argue with people. I have argued with people. I think there should be a grocery store downtown. There should be a full-fledged grocery store. It stays open until midnight. Like, I think it would succeed.
I'm not sure I agree with
Okay.
you.
Well, then you really won't like my other idea, which is when the Arby's was still there on the corner.
Yeah.
When it closed, I was like, if I had money
Yeah.
and knowledge, I would turn that into a 24-hour diner. I was like, I think you would not do well like Sunday through Wednesday, but I think Thursday, Friday, Saturday, you would do very well.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of people talk about 24-hour diner.
Yeah.
At one point, I guess it was when Enterprise moved out of
Yeah.
what became Merchants of Beer. There was talk about the diner.
Yeah.
You know, it's a fake diner, but the diner that
Yeah.
sits there on the corner. And there was somebody who was talking about perhaps moving it to some derelict property like near the overpasses
Yeah.
in the old city and having it be a 24-hour
A legit
diner.
24-hour diner.
And I thought that might work, but I don't
Yeah.
know. The grocery stores are, I guess I would argue with you, here's two things. One, the margins are tiny.
Yeah.
So they make their money by volume. And I don't know that we have enough population downtown to sustain it. The population downtown has grown, but it's a little deceptive. An example, I lived at Gallery Lofts until recently, and it's a big building. It's over Mass General. And so, you know, you look at that from the street, how many places would you guess are in there? How many units? What would you think? The Mass General building, you know that building.
Yeah. 4, 10, 50, 40.
13.
Really?
13. You've got masts in the basement, and then on the ground level, you've got offices on the next floor.
Okay.
And then you got 2 floors of residential is all. That building is only 4 stories tall from
I
the
thought
street.
it was like 10 stories.
I know
too.
people think it is.
Yeah.
And they tend to think that about a lot of the buildings downtown. So you only have 13 units. Well, on our floor there were 7. Full-time residents, 2.
This is a thing I've heard
2.
about downtown.
It's
how,
becoming a shell.
Yeah, that it's a lot of people Airbnb or
No,
weekend.
There were no Airbnbs in our
Okay.
building. These were people who lived in Florida,
Oh,
but went to UT, so they like to come up for part of football season. Or they live in Farragut and they like to have a place to come on the weekend if they want to.
I know one of those. I know 2 of those people that happen to own a venue down there that he told me, we will drink when we're at our venue and we don't want to make the drive all the way back to our home. And I was like, and you have the money to do that, so good for you.
Exactly, and then it was confounding to me. All over downtown right now, there are $700,000 to $1 million condos that are empty most of the time. And so those are the people who should be going to a grocery store or should be doing other things to support downtown businesses. And it kind of is illustrative of the fact that we don't have the population down there that people think we do.
Yeah.
It's bigger than it has been in many, many years. I don't know that ever is true.
I guess I also think about the person who is visiting that's staying at one of the hotels. They need deodorant.
Mm-hmm.
Or are they going to have to hop on the bus to go down to Publix? I mean, they can go to the market if they get in there before 7 p.m. or whenever it closes.
The market, the pharmacy is now stocking some of that kind of thing.
Okay.
So you could easily get the.
You know what I mean? Like I think about that when
Yes.
I was just in Atlanta and it was 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. And I was like, I don't like drinking out of the tap whenever I'm somewhere else. I just want to get a gallon of water.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, let me find. And I found a Walgreens
Of course, a
that was
CVS,
within
whatever.
half a mile of my hotel.
But the other thing about the grocery stores that I would say is that we've had one downtown for the last 3 years, 4 years, whatever. Red Panda.
Oh, yeah.
And Jesse has now reeled it back in. I mean, they don't have nearly the grocery items they had because people didn't buy them.
Well, my hot take on that is...
Prices.
Yes. I stopped in there after going and having cigars at Alchemy. Yeah, Alchemy.
Yeah.
And I wanted just chocolate syrup for chocolate milk the next morning.
Sure.
Picked up a little thing of chocolate milk, put it up there, and they're like, that's $5.49. I was like, are you high? Like, no. That's why I say, I think if the Publix that is on UT Commons was downtown, it would be doing a lot better than UT Commons year round. How about saying that? I think there are also a lot of people that visit downtown that would love to have something that I'm down here for a show and need to pick up something on my way home. I don't know.
I will say that the prices that they charge at Red Panda are not unrelated to what I said earlier about the margins being so thin on grocery items. They can't sell in that small a store anywhere near at the thin margin, so they have to charge more. I know. I mean, it's a dilemma.
It's one of those. I think
people
if it
say
was,
that, but
I don't want to be Food City. I don't want to be a Kroger. But I think if it was something like a Publix, that if it went in and it was the size of the Mass General store, let's say, I think it would shock people how well it would do. That's my hot take.
Well, yeah. I mean, a lot of people say Trader Joe's as an example because of the size and because they tend to offer more bougie kinds of, cheeses and all that kind of stuff that a lot of downtown people would want.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I would love to see it happen, but when I get asked about that as a downtown resident of 15 years, like, well, what do you do about a grocery store? Well, we get in our car and we drive to one just like you do. Yeah. Like, you don't have a grocery store in your neighborhood, and you really wouldn't want one on this little tiny street. So we don't either. And ideally in a big city, of course, you can walk everywhere and do everything. But I don't know that Knoxville's going to do that in my lifetime.
I don't know. I will say I loved having the food. Well, it was what was it before Food City? The little Food City I had over here in the old Kmart park and Kmart shopping center over here. I loved it when it was right there because then I wouldn't have to drive to Fountain City. Like it was actually not. This is something somebody and I talked about the other day. I said, I can't remember what brought this up. I was like, I think more residential areas need to have shops in their residential areas because I was talking about like out here on Fairmont. There's a building that is now a pet grooming place that it used to be a grocery store that had a market in the back and you could buy sandwiches at lunch and it did pretty good. Well, like La Esperanza right over here.
Right.
Like,
saw that tonight when I was driving here. So I mean that's the way cities have been.
Yeah.
Cities and towns have been through the millennia, right?
Yeah.
Until Henry Ford started hoisting this car thing at us, and then that's what changed everything because you could get in your car and you could drive to those things. You didn't have to have those nearby.
Yeah.
One other word on food for downtown, though, I think I will add. While I think the Market Square Farmers Market for many people is a place to see and be seen, for downtown dwellers, it's a grocery store.
Yeah.
I mean, we get our vegetables there. We get a lot of our stuff there. I buy my coffee there. I mean, we get a lot of our food there. So during the productive months, particularly,
which nowadays is like 10 months out of the year. Good Lord.
Right. And soon in a country near you, 12 months a year. As we extend the growing season and make the growing season great again. But it really is not just like a fun thing to do on a Saturday. It's like we get up and we try to be there when they open because we know which vendors we want to buy from and we know what vegetables they have. And before I moved downtown, and this is kind of ironic because you think, well, living in the city, you're not going to learn about farms, but I didn't know the growing seasons. I didn't know when things came in, and now I can pretty well sequence you through the summer.
Okay. That's one thing. There were periods where I did the farmer's market every Saturday because I loved also that was food trucks were relatively new. So I'd go and get food,
Right.
and then I would shop. I would get bread. I would get cookies. I would get veggies. Not so much on the veggies.
Right. I'm not either really, but I've gotten better about it.
Yeah. That's right.
And part of it is having
That it's there.
fresh and it's real.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there are a lot of vegetables that I like now that I never did before because I was getting some bastardized version of them that was really not resembling real food, you know.
Monsanto version.
Yeah,
Anyway.
right.
All right. We're going to go backwards.
All right, let's go
Because I
backwards.
realized we don't have 4 hours. So I'm like, oh, crap. I got questions I need to actually run through.
All right.
So your friend you were kvetching, I'll use some Yiddish, about there people not talking about downtown, and one of your friends said you should write it.
Right.
So were you a techie person? Did you?
No.
Okay.
My response to her was, "What do you mean me write it? Where am I going to write it?
Yeah.
I don't own a newspaper." And
Yeah.
she said, "A blog." I said, "Okay, what's that?" I mean, that's where I was.
Yeah.
Now, I was already working in libraries, so I knew a little bit. Actually, I knew a little bit about coding and some of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So some of my library skills came in handy when I actually did start it. But she said, "I can get you on a blogger, you know, tonight," and so she did.
Yeah.
And I woke up the next morning with, you know, a kind of a pounding head and realized I have a blog.
Yeah.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
So I took that ugly selfie, and I didn't know the word selfie, and I didn't have a phone that took pictures, but I had a camera, and I turned it on myself with a flash, and I went ching, and took an old school selfie.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And put it out there, and it was Knoxville Urban Guy, and I had these glasses on, and people couldn't really tell who I was. And
Were you into photography before that?
not at all.
Not at all. Okay.
Not at all. I was a writer, and I wanted to write, and then pretty quickly I realized,
Yeah.
oh, some people don't read words; they look at pictures.
Yeah.
And I also realized that, you know, if I'm describing, like I remember there was a video shoot outside my house, which was just the coolest thing. I'm sitting here in my house, and I look out at Kendrick Place,
Yeah.
and there's people dressed like space aliens, and they're doing this full-fledged music video kind of thing.
I assume that's a little iffy or a Will Wright. video?
No, it was pre all that.
Oh, okay.
No, this was 2010.
Okay.
I forget the name of the band. I occasionally see one of the members around still. Anyway, it was just really cool. But,
Yeah.
you know, describing that versus having photographs with that,
Yeah.
you've got to have photographs, right? You really, at this point, you would want video. But so I started taking photographs, and I had a point and shoot camera. It was a cheap camera. I didn't know what I was doing. I was, you know, it was terrible. And so I was taking really bad pictures, but a lot of them, and, you know, starting to, I guess I have enough aesthetic sense that I started to kind of get an idea of
Yeah.
like what would make a better photograph in this situation, or what would make a good photograph out of all these options here. And then a real turning point was there was a neo-Nazi march
I remember
in
that.
2010, August of 2010, in downtown Knoxville. And I had already, I was 8 weeks into my website. I was 8 weeks. And I'd already started turning more serious because I'm a serious person. And so I'd written a sequence on homelessness, for example. So I'd already kind of started to recognize that if I was going to write about a city, I had to write an honest website about a city.
Yeah.
And there are all these parts, and not all of them are pretty. And so I covered that march, and I had people after that. I took lots of pictures. I took tons of pictures. I had people after that say, your coverage was better than the News Sentinel. And that was a kind of a pivotal moment for me to realize I could do actual journalism, maybe. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, what could pass for it. And the photographs from that day were what made that coverage. And I was really probably the only thing that was decent about the coverage. And so I started getting more serious about my photographs. Also, Jack Neely's been really influential on me. And I don't know if he even knows it, but one of the ways was, I remember him writing an article where he talked about a photograph, and it was an early Knoxville photograph, and somebody had taken a picture of a family member. That's all it was.
Yeah.
But in the background were all these little details about that part of Gay Street that nobody remembered or knew.
Yeah.
And so off he went on, his one of his Jack things. And so I started thinking about that and thinking, I'm taking more photographs right now of downtown Knoxville than anybody else is.
Yeah.
And I owe it to posterity for them to be decent. So if I get a better camera, I could probably make better pictures. So I got a better camera, and I took a photography class, and my pictures got better. And I took another photography class, and then I realized the limitations of that camera, and I got a better camera. And
welcome to the world of photography.
That's right.
I need to get another one.
That's right. So I do not consider myself a photographer. I mean, you talk a photographer, you're talking Bruce McCamish, you're talking Bill Foster. Those are photographers. But I take the best pictures I can.
Okay.
That's the way I look at it. And I'm taking pictures, particularly in those early years, of things that nobody else is going to have pictures of. Now I don't know so much because downtown's such a groovy thing now, right? So the news stations and everybody
has a
that's right. So we're inundated with
camera in their
exactly
photo lab.
But that wasn't the case at the time, particularly. And I still like to think that I'm probably photographing some things that nobody else is photographing. Yeah. I did a story this past week about the new sculpture, right? Well, I photographed it every day. Nobody else has done that.
Yeah.
And kept them in a systematic way and put them together anywhere that they'll be found in the future, probably.
No.
So it's still happening.
Early days, were you publishing every day like you are now? I
fell into that really early.
Okay.
And I read a book about blogging once I learned that it was an actual thing. And in that book, one of the things I learned was that if you want to build readership, you have to have content and constant content. So I committed early on to doing that. I probably missed some days, but it was hard. The first 4 years that I wrote did the website, I was working full time in Oak Ridge.
Yeah.
So, my commute plus my work day plus my commute back was a lot of hours. And in those spare hours after work, I had to find content and do whatever I was going to do, take the pictures and write. And so for 4 years, I did that. The fourth year, I had gotten a couple of advertisers and knew that I was going to retire. So that final year that I worked in Oak Ridge, I probably averaged 4 hours sleep a night because I was determined I was going to do it every day and I was going to do it well every day. So that's probably when I started writing somewhat decent articles because I don't think they really were much up to that point.
No. I don't know if I've ever shared you this. There's a point in 07, 08 where I published an arts and entertainment magazine for 6 issues called Paper Thin. I did it all myself.
Wow.
While I was working at the News Sentinel.
That's hard.
While I was doing freelance work. And it was like there were periods where I was lucky to get 30 minutes of sleep a night.
Right.
And it was usually here on this couch. And then I would go back in there and work.
Right.
And it killed me. And it...
That's how my last 9 months of working were.
Yeah.
But I really felt like at that point I had a chance to launch this into a full-time job and make enough money off of it that I could, survive. And, and so I was just determined.
Yeah. You said the Nazi one, but one of the questions I had was there a particular event or story that made you realize the blog had gained traction? Was there something other than the Nazi rally?
Well, I think when I did that series on homelessness, that was about a month in. All this happened really fast when I look back on it. that got a lot of response online. And then I wrote the Nazi one, and I guess those are the ones that I remember the most early. There was another one that I wrote in those first 2 or 3 years. They could be listening to this. So I learned that there was an Old City business that had a massive amount of ammunition inside their facility.
Do you know any sign language? I could do the
Yes. Right. I do know sign language. Yes, I know it.
Yes.
So yes, you're right.
Oh, this was a frequent topic of conversation because there were a couple guys that may have been on the main drag that may have had a marketing person that they may have done work for said people and realized a little bit in, they're like, oh, crap.
So I don't know how I learned it.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody tipped me off. I think it was the beginning of when I was starting to get tips, because now, I get messages all the time from people saying one thing or another is happening. So maybe that's where I first got it. So God bless Oak Ridge Schools for paying me for one full work day, while for 8 hours, all I did was snoop on the internet and see if I could figure this thing out. And by the end of the day, I had figured out that some of the arms that were sold to the God, I'm blanking on it now. The Colorado shooter, the first.
The Aurora. Oh no, you're talking about
the first.
The Dylan.
Yeah,
I'm
blanking on the name of the school, but yeah, it was the first mass shooting at a school. It was in the 90s, and
I was at Pellissippi walking through the lunchroom, and it was up on the TV.
Right
when that happened.
I can't believe I can't think of the name of it.
I'm sad and happy. Sad in that there have been so many that I can't remember what it was called, but also happy in that I don't want to think about that.
Right.
I think.
So I learned that someone connected with this group, and I never kind of connected all the dots, had sold him his ammunition online.
Lovely.
And so I started digging, and then I found records online of shipments of all this ammunition to this place. Then I found the company that was connected to it, and they had a website, and they were selling the kind of guns that are always used. That God bless all the gun owners out there. The kind of guns that are always used in these shootings. And I always call them automatic weapons, and I'm always corrected. They're not automatic weapons. Whatever. Play your semantic games. It was the kind of guns that are used in mass shootings.
Yeah.
And it was all coming from there. And so I wrote the article, and I was like I want to keep my head under the pillow for the next 3 days. But I got contacted by a city official who said, I've been hammered all day by phone calls about this. What do you know? And we talked, and he basically said, there's nothing we can do. And I said, but, if there's a fire in the old city, that whole place is going to explode.
Yeah.
And he said, well, there's no city ordinance that says they can't have that in their facility. Wow. So that's what I was told. But it was a kind of a turning point in that, so people read what I wrote, and they contacted the city, and the city is having to now deal with it. And that was kind of a rush. That was kind of one of those moments where, this is the thing. This is and I've got a responsibility now.
Yeah.
It's not just goofy. I saw a video being filmed on the street today. It became a little more serious at that point. Not that I don't still do goofy stuff, but I realized that I had a readership. That was the shocking thing, Jody.
Yeah.
I thought my original goal was maybe some people, 20 people, will find this and realize that, hey, living downtown might be a cool thing, who hadn't considered it up to that point. What I didn't know was we were part of a movement back to urban spaces. I didn't know that at the time. And so that's why it caught on. I was lucky in that I started writing about something that was of great interest to a lot of people at a specific time before I knew that it was a thing.
Well, it goes back to I think about like stuff like, I hate to compare it to like Barstool Sports. It's like right place, right time. It's like at a time where news media is in a weird place and maybe they're not grabbing onto the internet as much as they should be, even though it was 2009.
Right.
Like, hell, I worked at the paper. I can tell you what they were doing in 2009. They were trying to figure out if they should just paywall the entire damn site. Like, like it was insane working there. And then you have people like Metropulse getting bought out. So you had this weird dynamic of, you know, we're in a spot where people are not looking for something and they found you.
Right.
And that's how it, right place, right time.
Well, it really was. So that was I would say that was a turning point. Another one that I did that garnered a ton of attention was my articles on SawWorks. I don't know if you remember those, but I did I did a deeper dive into that probably than I've ever done into anything else because, you know, the one of the big losses with media, and it's because of the nature of what it's evolved to, is investigative journalism. Because you don't have time. You know, I was on a Zoom meeting with some journalists during the pandemic, right? And these are people who had been doing real journalism for 30 years, right?
Yeah.
And they were talking about being told, like there was one, I think this lady was at the Nashville paper, being told, here's something we want you to dig into and find everything you can. And you take as long as it takes, and that you've got this other staff person to work with you, and let us know what resources you need. And she spent like 2 months on that story.
Yeah.
I mean, that is just simply mind-boggling for me to think about as a person who has to write an article every day. Every day.
Yeah.
So you don't have time to investigate anything.
Yeah.
So that SawWorks article, I put a lot of time and energy into. I interviewed a lot of people. I made a lot of phone calls kind of all over the country because some of those people had scattered by that time, and put together what I think was a pretty good summary of what had happened at SawWorks.
Was
How important
Stancil one of those people that you interviewed? I can't remember.
I don't think I knew him yet.
Because he had the
He
cigars
was there. He had the
for
cigars.
a while.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't remember if I talked to him or not. I talked to ex-brewers and, you know, just all the kinds of people like that. And, of course, that all came back to, in the end, there were plenty of people who didn't come out looking good in that. But it really came back to, God, I'm blanking on his name now, but the guy that bought up Enderley, that bought up all the downtown properties, he ultimately bought SawWorks. And that's when the really shady stuff started.
Yeah. I still remember there, God, not to turn it back to me, but there was a building right across from them. Like where they sat and how they were on that L.
Right.
There was a building right there in the corner that was like, same thing. If I had money, and I even talked to a buddy about this, it's like I would turn that into like a co-op working space with offices and all this because it was the perfect size.
And if you could have done with no income stream for a few years, it would have been big.
Yeah.
But you'd had to survive that because we weren't ready for that then.
But I was like, that is the perfect building. This is the perfect space. And that friend who we talked about partnering on it, he worked in tech. And he had money and connections to make that happen. It's like, nope, it needs to be out in West Knoxville. I was like, no, it does not.
Right.
Because West Knoxville people have homes. They're not going to come to this.
Right.
I was like, this needs to be here for all the people. We can work with Visit Knoxville on people who are coming here to town, you know, offer this as an option.
I think we're just now
Yeah.
to the space where we understand that. I mean, part of it was pandemic speeding up all that, but where we get that and we can support it. You know, several people tried different spaces that didn't work, and now the one on Broadway is probably going to make it and do well.
Broadway.
Yeah. It's got a coffee shop downstairs.
Oh, yeah.
I can't think of the
Across
name.
from Broadway Baptist, where I grew up going to church.
There you go.
Partial.
Yes, partial coffee. Yep.
Okay, I got to write
Right,
down.
and then they've got the co-working space. I think has a different name,
Yeah.
but yeah.
I've got to write down. There are so many things that I don't feel comfortable mentioning on the podcast that I will talk to you after the podcast, or if we have lunch, I will bring up these things.
Okay. So do you not edit this?
Nope.
Just straight up put
Straight
it out
through.
there. Okay.
Because but there are things I'm like, this is something I'm curious to hear your thoughts on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to. Good Lord, I cannot type with one hand. There we go. The Sawworks thing was.
Yeah.
I wish I still had some Marble City Brewing swag because
Yeah.
I loved that how that looked, and I never liked the Sawworks logo and all that. It was
But I did like that they connected back to the original brewery and,
Yeah.
made that a thing.